The mist that clings to the valleys of Holmes County, Ohio, is different from the fog anywhere else on Earth. It is heavier, thicker, and carries the scent of damp earth and old limestone. It does not just obscure the world. It silences it completely. Before the sun even hints at rising over the eastern ridges, the world is a blanket of gray and damp stillness. The only sound breaking this ancient silence was the rhythmic, hollow thud of a horse's hoof against the packed dirt of the barn floor. Inside the barn, the air was warm and thick, smelling of sweet hay, fermented silage, and the animal heat of 40 Holstein cows. For most people, this was just a barn. But for Leah Yoder, this darkness was a sanctuary. Leah was 19 years old, sitting on a 3-legged wooden milking stool, her forehead pressed against the warm, rough flank of a cow named Bessie. Her hands moved with a muscle memory that required no thought at all. Squeeze, pull, release. The milk hit the metal pail with a sharp ping that eventually softened into a frothy, rhythmic hiss as the bucket filled. But Leah's mind was not on the milk. It was not on the cold dampness seeping through the leather of her work boots or the ache in her lower back. Her mind was on the sunrise that was about to happen outside these walls. She was thinking about the specific color of the light. To most of her family, her dead, Lion her mungim, Saratha sunrise was simply a clock. It was the signal that the day's labor had begun. It was functional. It was God's way of saying, work. But to Leah, it was a mixture of burnt orange, bruised purple, and a pale, trembling yellow that she didn't have a name for. In her head, she was mixing paints she wasn't allowed to own. She was shading corners with charcoal she had to hide. She imagined taking a piece of burnt wood from the stove and capturing the way the light hit the dust motes dancing in the air. She saw the world in frames, in compositions, in shadows and light. Leah, the voice cracked through the barn air, sharp and low, shattering her daydream. It was her brother, Levi, carrying 2 heavy pails of feed down the center aisle. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed under the brim of his hat. "Dad is waiting for the milk," Levi said, dumping the feed into the trough with a loud crash. "The truck will be here in 10 minutes. You are dreaming again, Schwester." Leah jolted, the image of the sunrise vanishing from her mind like smoke. "I'm coming, Levi. Just finishing now." She stood up, smoothing her dark apron. The heavy smell of the barn, which to most would be pungent, was to her the smell of safety. It was the smell of home. But lately, that safety had begun to feel like a cage. She hoisted the heavy stainless steel milk can with a grunt of effort. Her arms were strong, hardened by years of carrying water, hanging wet laundry on the line in freezing winds, and kneading dough for hours. She walked out of the barn and into the gray morning air. And there it was. The sun was cresting the hill, illuminating the frost on the corn stubble. It looked like millions of tiny diamonds, scattered on brown velvet. The beauty of it was almost physically painful. Her fingers twitched at her side, tapping against her dress. She wanted to capture it. She wanted to keep it. But in the Amish faith, in the strict Ordnung of their church district, creating images, graven images, was a pathway to vanity. It was pride. To draw the world was to try to improve upon God's creation, or so Bishop Amos Troyer had preached just last Sunday. He had said that a heart focused on beauty is a heart distracted from duty. Leah lowered her head, forcing her eyes away from the horizon. She carried the milk to the cooling tank, her heart beating a little faster than it should have. Under the floorboards of her attic bedroom, wrapped in an old oilcloth to keep out the damp, was a sketchbook. It was filled with drawings of the horses, the twist of an old oak tree, and the curve of her mother's hands while quilting. If they were found, The shame would be unbearable. The day's work in the Yoder household was a relentless cycle, a wheel that never stopped turning. After milking came the washing. The wringer washer chugged rhythmically on the back porch, powered by a sputtering diesel engine, since they were not connected to the electrical grid. The noise was deafening, a sharp contrast to the quiet of the fields. Leah fed wet trousers and heavy dressers through the rollers, watching the water squeeze out in dark. The water was freezing, numbing her fingers, but she worked without complaint. Inside, her mother, Sarah, was chopping cabbage at the kitchen table, the screen door slightly ajar. "Leah," her mother called out, her voice gentle but firm. "When you are done, I need help with the chow-chow. The jars are boiled and ready." "Ya mangim," Leah replied, wiping her hands on a rag. It was market day. The Yoders ran a small stand at the edge of their property, selling jams, chow-chow, quilts, and baked goods to the tourists who drove through Holmes County. They came in droves to gawk at the plain people. Leah usually dreaded market duty. She hated the way the Englishers, the non-Amish, stared at them. They looked at Leah and her family as if they were animals in a zoo or actors in a historical play. They took photos without asking, stealing images of their faces against their will. But today, Dad needed Levy in the fields to repair a fence line that had been damaged by a storm, so Leah was sent to man the stand alone. She stood by the roadside, the wooden table laden with jars of red beet eggs and shimmering apple butter. The road was a paved scar cutting through their land, the boundary line between the holy and the profane. Cars whizzed by, flashes of metal and glass, carrying people who had nowhere to be but were in a rush to get there. Around noon, the traffic thinned. The sun was high and hot. A silver car slowed down. It didn't speed past like the others. It crunched onto the gravel shoulder, dust billowing up and coating the jars of jam. The engine cut off. Silence returned, but it was a tense silence. The door opened, and a young man stepped out. He didn't look like the usual tourists who wore loud T-shirts and baseball caps. He wore a faded denim jacket and carried a heavy black bag over his shoulder. He had messy brown hair and eyes that seemed to be scanning everything not with judgment, but with an intense curiosity. He walked toward the stand slowly, respecting the space. Leah adjusted her bonnet, looking down at the table, refusing to meet his eyes. "Guten Tag," she whispered, realizing too late she should have used English. "Good day, can I help you?" The man smiled. It was an easy, crooked smile that made him look younger than he was. "Hi. I'm sorry about the dust. I didn't realize the gravel was so loose on the shoulder." "It is fine," Leah said, her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron. She waited for him to ask the usual questions. "Do you have electricity? Is that real hair? Can I take a picture?" But he walked closer and didn't look at the jams. He looked past her, toward the old willow tree that dipped its branches into the creek behind the stand. The light was filtering through the leaves, creating a dappled pattern on the water. "The light here," he said, almost to himself. "It's incredible, the way it filters through those branches. It's soft, but it has edge." Leah looked up, surprised. He was seeing what she saw. He wasn't looking at the Amish girl. He was looking at the light. "It is calm," she said cautiously. He turned his gaze to her. "I'm Caleb. I'm a photographer. I'm doing a piece on rural Ohio landscapes, not people," he added quickly, sensing her tension. "Just the land, the way the seasons changed the geometry of the fields." "A photographer," Leah repeated the word like it was something dangerous. "You make images." "I try to capture moments," Caleb corrected gently, "before they're gone." Time moves so fast out there. He gestured to the road. I feel like I need to freeze it sometimes. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small book. It wasn't a camera. It was a notebook, similar to the one hidden under Leah's floorboards, but his was leather-bound and expensive. He opened it. Sometimes I sketch out the framing before I shoot. He turned the book toward her. On the paper was a charcoal sketch of a fence line, stark and beautiful in its simplicity. It was just a few lines, but it carried the weight of the wood and the sag of the wire. Leah's breath caught in her throat. It was good. It was very good. Without thinking, she leaned forward, her artistic eye taking over her caution. You used soft charcoal for the shadows, she murmured, her finger hovering over the paper. But the lines, you pressed too hard on the wire. It looks heavy. The wire should look like it is floating. Caleb blinked, staring at her. The Amish girl in the plain blue dress and white cap, who wasn't supposed to know anything about art, had just critiqued his shading technique with perfect accuracy. You draw? He asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. Leah recoiled, realizing her mistake. Her face flushed hot with shame. She had spoken too much. She had revealed the secret part of herself. No, she stammered, backing away. No, of course not. I must go. My father will be waiting. She turned to flee back toward the house, abandoning the stand. Wait, Caleb called out. He didn't chase her, respecting the distance between their worlds. I'll be here tomorrow. Same time, just to buy some jam. Please. Leah didn't look back. She ran until her lungs burned, the gravel crunching beneath her boots like thunder. She ran not from him, but from the terrifying realization that for the first time in her life, someone had spoken her language. That night, the silence of the farmhouse felt oppressive. The gas lamp hissed in the kitchen as the family ate dinner. The meal was simple: meatloaf, buttered noodles, and creamed corn. They ate in silence, as was the custom. Contemplating the blessings of the food, Dad sat at the head of the table, his beard long and untrimmed, signifying his married status and his adherence to the old way. He was a good man, a hard worker who loved his children, but he loved God's law more. He believed that the world outside was a devouring fire, and his duty was to build a wall around his family to keep them from burning. He chewed slowly, his eyes scanning the faces of his children. The stand made good money today? Dad asked, breaking the silence as he wiped his mouth with a napkin. Yeah, Dad, Leah said, keeping her eyes on her plate. The jam sold well. The tourists were buying the apple butter. Did you speak to the Englishers? Only to sell dead. It was a lie by omission. Leah felt a knot of guilt tightened in her stomach. In the Amish culture, honesty was paramount. There were no small lies. Every deception was a brick in a wall between her and God. After dinner during the evening Bible reading, Leah tried to focus on the German words her father Selig sind die, then sie werden das Herrreich besitzen. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But her mind drifted back to the sketch in the man's book. Caleb. She wondered what else he had drawn. She wondered if he had colored pencils, or paints, or canvases that stretched wide like the sky. Later, in the safety of her attic room, she lit a small kerosene lamp, keeping the wick low so the light wouldn't spill out from under the door. The shadows danced on the slanted ceiling. She pulled up the loose floorboard near her bed. She took out her sketchbook. It was just a cheap notepad she had bought at the dry goods store years ago, claiming she needed it for recipes. She turned to a fresh page. Her hand trembled. She closed her eyes and recalled his face, the messy hair, the crooked smile, the intelligent eyes. She began to draw. Charcoal. On paper. It was forbidden. It was vanity. It was a graven image of a man she barely knew. But as the image formed, Leah felt a rush of exhilaration she had never felt in prayer. This was her voice. This was her soul speaking. The next 2 weeks were a blur of terrifying duality. Leah lived 2 lives. By day, she was the dutiful Amish daughter. She helped canning pizzas, the kitchen filled with sticky, sweet steam. She helped a mother quilt, stitching tiny, perfect lines into the geometric patterns. But every afternoon, she found an excuse to go to the creek or the market stand. Caleb came back. He came back every day. They didn't meet at the stand anymore. It was too public. They met by the old covered bridge, a mile down the road, where the trees provided cover. It was an innocent collision of worlds, yet entirely forbidden. Caleb showed her books of Rembrandt, Monet Wyeth. Leah had never seen such things. She stared at the pages, her mouth slightly open, tears pricking her eyes. "They painted the light," she whispered, touching a picture of a field by Andrew Wyeth. "They painted the feeling of the wind." "How did they do that?" "You can do this, Leah," Caleb said. He was sitting on a rock, looking up at her. "I saw the way you looked at my sketch. You have the eye. You have the gift." "It is not a gift," Leah said, her voice trembling. "It is a temptation. In my world, we are part of the whole. To try to stand out, to say, 'Look at what I made,' is to separate yourself from the community. It is pride. Is it pride to share beauty?" Caleb challenged gently. "If God made the world beautiful, isn't capturing it a form of worship? Isn't it a way of saying thank you for the sight?" Leah looked at him. He didn't understand. Coldente. He lived in a world where follow your dreams was a commandment. She lived in a world where deny yourself was the law. "I cannot show anyone," she said. If my dead knew ... I would be shunted aside. I would be trouble." "Show me," Caleb said softly. "Just me. No one else has to know." Leah hesitated. The fear was pounding in her ears. Then, with shaking hands, she reached into the deep pocket of her apron. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't the drawing of him that was too intimate, too dangerous. It was a sketch of her father's hands, rough and calloused, holding a Bible. Caleb took the paper. He studied it for a long time. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the rushing water of the creek. "Leah," he said finally, looking up, "this is ... This is incredible. The emotion in the hands, the weight of the book. You have raw talent that people go to art school for years to find." Leah felt a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "It is just a drawing?" "No," Caleb said. "It's a doorway. You could do something with this. There are galleries in Columbus, in New York. You could have a life where this is what you do." "Stop," Leah said, backing away. "Do not speak of such things. I am Amish. I will be baptized soon. I will marry an Amish man, perhaps Simon Miller, and I will raise children, and I will die here." "Is that what you want?" Caleb asked, standing up. "Or is that what you're told to want?" Leah didn't answer. She grabbed the drawing back and ran. The crisis came on a Sunday. 3 weeks later, Sunday service, or Jime, was held at the Yoder farm that week. The partition walls of the house were removed, and wooden benches were set up in rows. Families from the entire district arrived in their buggies, the men in black suits and broad-brimmed hats, the women in their Sunday best. The service lasted 3 hours. The preaching was a low, rhythmic chant in High German, speaking of humility, submission, and the dangers of the world. Bishop Amish was a formidable man with eyes that seemed to drill into one's soul. He spoke that day about the foxes that spoil the vines, the little sins that creep in and destroy the vineyard of faith. He spoke of secret things, of hidden rebellions. Leah sat on the hard wooden bench, her back rigid, sick. She felt like a fox in the vineyard. She felt the weight of her sketchbook upstairs, like it was made of lead. After the service, during the common meal, where the women served bean soup and freshly baked bread, Leah saw her father talking to the bishop. They were looking at her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Did take no. Had someone seen her at the bridge? Had Levy found something? Later that afternoon, when the last buggy had pulled away and the benches were being stacked, Leah Yoder called Leah into the sitting room. Her mother was there, too, sitting in her rocking chair, wiping her eyes with a white handkerchief. On the table sat her sketchbook. Leah's world stopped. The air left the room. She felt her knees go weak. "Dead," she whispered. Eli didn't shout. His voice was filled with a sorrow so deep it was terrifying. "I was looking for the mouse traps in the attic. Leah, I saw the loose board. I thought perhaps a rat had chewed it." He opened the book. He flipped past the horses, past the trees, and landed on the page she had drawn most recently. It was Caleb. It was undeniable. It was a perfect likeness. "Who is this man?" Eli asked, pointing a trembling finger at the face. "He is ... No one," Leah lied, her voice shaking. "Do not lie to me, daughter." Eli slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked like a whip. "This is an I have seen his car down the road." "You have been meeting him?" Leah looked at her mother, pleading for help, but Sarah looked away, unable to bear the shame. "We talked," Leah cried, tears spilling over. "Just talked. About art. About the world. He is kind, dead." "Art." Eli spat the word, as if it were poison. "You make graven images of men? You meet a strange man in secret. Leah, do you know what you have done? You have opened the door to the devil. You have invited vanity into this house." "I only drew what I saw," Leah shouted, a sudden surge of rebellion rising in her chest, fueled by fear and adrenaline. "God gave me these eyes. God gave me these hands. Why is it a sin to use them? Why is beauty a sin?" The slap was shocking. It wasn't hard, but it was final. Eli had never struck her before. He looked at his own hand, trembling, then at her. "You are under the ban," he said, his voice breaking, "until you confess, until you burn these idols, and untie your heart from this outsider. You are separate from us. You will not eat at this table. You will not receive gifts. You are in darkness." Leah stood there, her cheek stinging. She realized then that it wasn't just about the drawings. It was about control. It was about the fear that if one thread was pulled, the whole tapestry of their life would unravel. Bishop Troyer would be informed in the morning. The shunning would be official. She would be a ghost in her own home. That night, Leah lay in her bed, but she did not sleep. The house was silent, but it was a cold silence now. She was an outcast. If Seistajid, she would have to stand before the church, confess her sin, burn her drawings in front of everyone, and promise never to pick up a pencil again. She would have to marry Simon Miller, a man who had never looked at a sunset with wonder, and bury the part of her that saw colors. She would live a good life, a holy life, but if she left, she lost them. She lost her mother's quilting, her father's reading voice, the smell of the barn, the community that would raise a barn in a day if it burned down. She would be an orphan in a world she didn't understand. She looked at the window. The moon was high and bright. She made her choice. She packed a small bag, a change of clothes, a loaf of bread, and the sketchbook her father had left on the table, as if it were contaminated. She couldn't leave it behind. It was her soul. She crept down the stairs. Every creak sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. She moved through the kitchen, the moonlight catching the jars of chow-chow she had helped make. She paused at the door, her hand on the latch. This was the crossing. 1 step, and she was plain. 2 steps, and she was English. She opened the door and stepped into the cool night air. The crickets were singing. The world felt huge and terrifyingly open. She didn't take a buggy. She walked. She walked the 3 miles to the main road, to the spot near the covered bridge. She didn't know if he would be there. She had no phone to call him. She had no way to reach him. It was a leap of faith, entirely different from the one she had been raised in. She was trusting in something she couldn't see. She sat on the guardrail of the highway, the asphalt cold beneath her. She waited. An hour passed. Then, too, the sky began to lighten, turning that bruised purple she loved so much. The birds began to sing. Headlights appeared in the distance. Day is low. It was the silver car. Caleb had been driving the roads since 4 a.m., unable to sleep, hoping, worrying, sensing that something had broken in the universe. He saw the lone figure in the blue dress and bonnet sitting on the guardrail. He pulled over and jumped out, leaving the engine running. Leah, she stood up. She looked small against the backdrop of the waking world. She looked at him, tears streaming down her face, but her chin was high. "I cannot go back," she said simply. Caleb looked at her bag, then at her eyes. He understood the magnitude of what she was saying. He wasn't just offering her a ride. He was accepting the weight of her entire life. He was taking responsibility for her soul. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice serious. "Leah, if you get in this car, everything changes. You can't undo this." Leah looked back, toward the dirt lane that led to the farmhouse. She imagined her mother waking up to find the empty bed. She imagined her father's heart breaking. The pain was a physical weight in her chest, a stone that she would carry forever. Then she looked at the sunrise. She looked at the colors exploding over the horizon, the oranges, the pinks, the golds. "I want to paint it," she whispered. "I want to paint it all." She opened the car door. 5 years later, a gallery in downtown Columbus, Ohio. The room is modern, with white walls and track lighting. It is quiet, but a respectful quiet, filled with the murmur of people admiring art. On the main wall hangs a large canvas. It is a masterpiece of light and shadow. It depicts an Amish man, seen from behind, walking into a dark barn. But the light catching the dust motes around him is golden, ethereal, holy. A woman stands in front of it. She wears jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair is cut short, modern, but her posture is still, calm, possessing a Gelassenheit, yielded stillness that the city hasn't been able to steal from her. Leah Yoder now. Leah Vance stares at the painting of the father she hasn't spoken to in 5 years. She has sent letters, but they all come back unopened. She feels a hand on her shoulder. It is Caleb. He doesn't say anything. He just stands with her, offering his warmth. She has her freedom. She has her art. She has a love that understands her soul. But as she looks at the painted figure of her father, she knows the truth that every person who crosses over learns eventually. You can leave the plain life. You can take off the bonnet and put down the German Bible. You can drive a car and use a phone. But you can never truly leave the silence. It stays in your bones. It stays in the way you peel an apple, the way you sit in a quiet room, the way you pray when you think no one is listening. Leah touches the canvas, her finger tracing the line of the barn door. "It is beautiful," Caleb says softly. "It is home," she whispers, a tear sliding down her cheek. "And I can never go back." The camera pulls back, leaving Leah standing before the memory of her past, captured in oil and grief, a permanent testament to the price of following a dream.